Welcome to the YourTown television program. My name is Jeff Kline, your host for this MPS Foundation sponsored segment where we bring you MPS faculty and students and what they're doing in the Monterey County area. In this segment, I'd like to welcome Colonel Todd Lyons, United States Marine Corps. Todd is the Senior Marine Representative at the Naval Postgraduate School. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, before we get into some of the more interesting details of your job, I always like to learn a little bit about the background of our guests. So what attracted you to the Marine Corps, and how did you join?
So in the late 80s, I was at college thinking about what I wanted to do with my future.
Well, what college? This is important.
Louisiana College.
Oh, good for you.
Small private school in the middle of Louisiana. And I realized that I wanted to do something that was important, that was going to take me away to faraway places, and also that was going to be a real challenge for me. And my grandfather had been on Guadalcanal and fought with the Marines there at Henderson Field as a Seabee. And so I had grown up with those stories. And I just decided that the Marine Corps was the place where my efforts could make a huge difference. And that's what made me go to the Marine Corps.
So did Louisiana have an ROTC program, or you went right to OCS? Is that right?
So I went to the Platoon Leader course, which is a unique program in the Marine Corps where for one summer you do 6 weeks and you kind of take the Marine Corps for a test drive, and then you come back for another summer for 6 weeks.
And they're taking you for a test drive.
And then they take you for a test drive. Right. And at the end of it, if you decide it's not the thing for you, you can walk away. And there's no requirement to go into the Marine Corps at that point. And it was a way that I could sell to my parents that I was actually thinking this through, that it wasn't something that I chanced into and did on a whim. And it really proved to me to be the best way to do it, because I was able to really consider every year after I had gone to the Platoon Leader course, why am I doing this? What is it that's driving me? And the decision kept coming back. This is exactly where I ought to be. This is the group of people that I want to work with for the rest of my life.
What a great program. Absolutely. And what a great result for having you in your long career and contributions in the service. That's great. Well, what did you study at Louisiana?
I was a bachelor's in history. Okay. So I also had a minor in communications and economics. So it was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do early in my life. So
you were commissioned as a second lieutenant, and then what Absolutely. Did you do?
I became an artillery officer. So I went through the basic school for Marine officers. It's a 6-month program where you learn basically to be a rifle platoon commander.
But this was after the program, the 2-part program.
Exactly.
So was there some repeat stuff in there, or?
So the platoon leader course really focuses on individual skills, fire team skills, and squad.
Right.
The basic school focuses on what do you need to be successful as a company grade officer.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's a little bit beyond that.
So you're talking about lieutenant and captain company
exactly.
grade. Right.
And those tactics and techniques that you'll need to be effective in whatever combat environment you might find yourself. After that, I chose to go into the artillery. I was lucky enough in our system to be able to do that. And I went to Fort Sill and studied for 6 months to become an artillery officer, and then went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina for my first assignment. And again, even though I was with the artillery, my actual assignments were mostly with 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and Infantry Battalion, deploying overseas to Norway. We went to...
So you were a forward artillery observer with them?
A forward observer and then an artillery liaison officer.
Right.
With
3rd
the
Battalion,
2nd Marines, exactly.
So you helped plan and helped the plans of supporting artillery for the maneuver of the infantry.
Absolutely.
So they never let you touch one of the 155 guns, is that
No,
it?
Actually I did do that. I was also a guns platoon commander and an XO.
But this was afterwards.
And so you got to do each one kind of in stages as the openings were available. And what you found was that you learned everything from the forward observer out with the infantry, really to the gun line and the fire direction center. And learning that process then allows you, when you later on become a commander, you're not surprised. You know who is the right fit in the right job.
Now, is that a normal progression? And just from my own knowledge, do you ever start off in the fire direction center and then go later to become a forward artillery observer, or is what you described the standard thing?
So I would say there's not necessarily a standard thing. And when I first came in, there were 2 guns platoons per battery. Mm-hmm. That later changed, and they assimilated them into one guns platoon. I was the XO. So you can do those jobs. You can either be a guns platoon commander or a fire direction officer or a forward observer as those initial tours, and then the executive officer tour and the artillery liaison officer. Those are the billets that you would matriculate into after you've done some of those other billets.
Sure. So I'm smart enough to know that you were a Marine rifleman first, then a Marine officer, and then a Red Leg.
Absolutely.
So after your artillery tours, what did you do?
So I went to the basic school and taught at
Quantico,
Quantico, Virginia.
Okay.
And that was probably the most impactful assignment that I had as a company grade officer. I worked with some of the finest human beings that I have ever met and probably will ever meet. All incredibly gifted officers, people that were motivated. We believed in teaching the lieutenants so that they could excel in their careers. And I think the proof is in the pudding that many of those that were my fellow officers at the basic school at that time, fellow instructors, stayed in and continued to serve in the Marine Corps at progressively higher levels of responsibility. We were lucky that we had Colonel Conway as our CO at the time. He would later become a commandant, but he gave us a vision of what the Marine Corps could be, and we were very passionate about trying to live up to the Marine Corps core values.
Well, in fact, you had the opportunity in that job to shape a generation of Marine officers, so that must have been very impressive.
It was incredibly empowering and satisfying in a way that both personally and professionally, I don't think you could, there's no analog to it in the civilian realm.
Right. In fact, well, we're going to revisit that as your roles and responsibility here. One of the reasons I stayed here after I retired was the opportunity to continue to work with junior officers. But let's stay with your career first. So after your instructor's duty, what did you do?
So I became first of all, a TTECG. It's a
TTDG.
Yeah, it's a tactical training and exercise controlled group.
Okay.
I was an observer controller, and we call them coyotes. And so I was the coyote for the artillery. And then after I did that for a while, I became a battery commander.
That's to advise groups how to better and improve their operational tactics and techniques, right?
I took the things that I learned at the basic school, focused on teaching officers company grade tactics, and moved it to teaching them how to do battalion, regimental, and division level operations. And then subsequently became the battery commander for Lima Battery, 3rd Battalion, 12th Marines in 29 Palms, California.
Oh, wonderful.
And you know, you have those moments in time where it's as perfect as it could possibly be. I was on an observation post in the middle of the desert, overlooking at my unit, doing live fire training, and I had that moment where it's like, this is as good as it will ever be. And so I had that moment.
Those were your Marines, your guns, and your training in a place where you can shoot guns.
That's exactly right. You know, and it was the location, the environment, and the people that all came together.
Absolutely. So you were also a graduate of MPS. When did you come here to get your degree then?
So I studied here in 1999 and 2000.
Was that before or after your battalion command, battery command?
After I had that epiphany as a battery commander, I realized I needed to go do something different, and I selected to become a foreign area officer.
Now, what's a foreign area officer?
Foreign area officer gets educated and then subsequently trained to go out and interface with host nation partners, with allies, in order to carry out the national interest. In some ways, it's influence, it's building relationships with them. It's leveraging your knowledge of the region, the culture, the politics, the people, and ultimately the language in order to do what the Marine Corps and our nation needs to be done. For me, coming to the Naval Postgraduate School was a way to open my eyes to what could be done. I had been, in a firing unit. I had been at the battalion and at the company level. This started really saying, how can I as a Marine be effective at the operational and the strategic level?
Now, you were a lieutenant colonel when you came here? Or?
No, I was a captain and got promoted to major
at that time. Okay,
while I was at the Naval Postgraduate School. I got promoted just outside of Herman Hall.
Oh, wonderful.
On the postgraduate school grounds.
And what region did you study?
Middle East.
Oh, okay. And then your follow-on tours were in the Middle East as well.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, obviously, I came and studied here before 9/11. And so there was a time before and a time after 9/11. And before, we didn't know really what the foreign area officer's role was going to be. After 9/11, it really snapped in, and we understood we were going to be at the pointy end of the spear. And that began when I went to Qatar in 2002. I helped Dov Zakheim, who was the Undersecretary for Secretary of Defense for Comptroller, working on the basing agreement for Al Udeid.
Right.
I then went on the march up in 2003 with the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force as their FAO, really writing the template for what a foreign area officer in a tactical unit would do.
In time of a conflict situation.
In
like
a time
that.
of
Wow.
conflict. So it was, again, a unique and wonderful time. People wouldn't believe the stories if you told them, kind of thing. And then subsequently served in Israel as my first full attaché tour. Served there for 4 years and had an absolutely remarkable time.
Well, what language did you study here then? Arabic, but then you went to Israel.
So I studied Arabic at
Right.
the Foreign Service Institute in Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay, right.
And then I also studied Hebrew a bit. My Arabic was stronger than my Hebrew at the time and still is. The goal was really to build that relationship not only with our partners, but
Right.
understanding what was going on, the dynamic with the Palestinians, with the Lebanese, and many of those relationships you could only get through Arabic. Having Arabic also was an entree to many of the Israeli groups who do speak Arabic, and there's about 50% of the words are cognates between Arabic and Hebrew.
Right.
So one really advances the other.
So in a way, what you've described, understanding and getting an insight into the culture, writing that up and then letting our senior policy people know, is sort of a form of soft intelligence, isn't it, in a way? And that is, you're trying to provide the intelligence and information about the dynamics and the history of the culture, what's currently going on, so we can make better decisions. Do you see yourself in that light, or?
So I would say it is that, but it's so much more.
Mm-hmm.
It is communicating messages between the governments in a way that gets beyond the 24-hour news cycle. It is the ability to take the best of what they're doing. Again, when I was in Israel, they had a military working dog program that was the best in the world at what it did in finding improvised explosive devices. I was able to bring that to the Marine Corps and see that in my time there move from being a capability that we didn't have to having a real capability that we deployed on the battlefield. And so that was just one example of where we're taking the best of what they are doing and then giving them the best of what we can do to make both partners much, much stronger. And so I think of it more as a relationship.
And a relationship builder.
I was building the relationship for our senior leadership.
That's
Absolutely.
great. Well, if we have more time, I want to know about those American dogs that learn from the
Absolutely.
Israeli dogs. But I want to shift now to your responsibilities at MPS. We've got about 5 minutes left. You're the Senior Marine Representative. What does that mean?
So I have 250 Marines that I'm responsible for at the Naval Postgraduate School, and that includes some Marines that are finished at the Naval Postgraduate School and in language studies up at DLI, the Defense Language Institute. My role is to both take the care and feeding of them, take care of them and their administration, but more importantly is to connect them with what issues are going on in the Marine Corps so that the work they do, the studies that they have are relevant to the requirements and the needs of the Marine Corps. And very often it's those needs that the Marine Corps doesn't even know
They haven't thought it yet. Yeah, that's right.
And so it's a wonderful responsibility. I have a letter that tells me I can go anywhere in the Marine Corps and talk to anybody I need to in order to further this mission. And again, coming back after almost 20 years and being able to see that development is incredible. And as you said earlier, our Marines really make the experience.
Right.
They are incredibly gifted, incredibly knowledgeable, and passionate about doing something that's impactful for the United States.
So can you give an example of a topic where a Marine focused on something that was of immediate relevance? I'm sure you give a lot of them, but just name a few of them.
So we had students that were saying, how are we going to operate in a communications denied environment? Our adversaries are probably not going to let us operate uncontested
That's right.
in space. And so how do we use free space optics to communicate? how can we leverage mesh network technology so that there's not one single node that's so important that if they take that out, the whole network comes down. Things that our faculty and students are working on in terms of network optional warfare, all these things are important and impactful, and it's not necessarily translating a capability immediately to the force, but it's saying we've got to develop a capability, because if we don't,
fill that gap.
we're gonna suffer.
And to explore the technologies that may be there to actually explore that gap.
That is
before
exactly
you turn
right.
into other systems commands. Well, now you are also the Associate Dean of Research at MPS, which is an interesting job to have, considering that you want to pair Marine Corps relevant research with the students, et cetera. So it's a natural outlay of that. Tell us some of your responsibilities in that job.
So the Associate Dean of Research, and I'll admit that I didn't really understand all of what I was getting into when I started.
So you said yes before you thought
Absolutely.
it through.
But one of the things I learned about is that we're really connecting not just students and faculty with topic sponsors within the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Department of Defense. We're really trying to connect them with academia and industry and leverage the best of what's going on outside of the DoD that's really opaque to those that are working and doing their day-to-day job in the Pentagon and in Quantico, Virginia. And it's not because they're bad folks. It's because of the tyranny of time. They don't have the luxury to look outside and say, there's a whole world out there. And people have shown the chart showing that there's a lot more innovation and research and development happening outside of DoD than going on inside DoD. I think our Secretary of the Navy understands that, and he certainly talked about that when he came in February. We've taken that mission and said, how do we as a research office take the great ideas that are happening inside MPS and help find companies to commercialize those and then sell back to DoD?
Exactly. Or vice versa, what ideas are out in industry that we can further their research and show their applicability. So you're sort of, when the Secretary of the Navy came here, you did challenge us on that one to reach out to industry, and that's one of your primary responsibilities then as Associate Dean of Research. Well, we only have a couple seconds left. What is the most memorable thing about your service in the Marine Corps? What's something that you take to you through all your life?
That's a great question. I think if it's anything, it's that writ large, I've been able to work with an incredible group of people and actually do something that was meaningful for the nation. I was able to, both in Israel and Oman and here, lead innovation, which was the adoption of new practices within the Marine Corps and the broader Department of Defense that radically changed what was in the realm of the possible. And that, for me, is what I'll take away from it, and that I have invested myself in the lives of those Marines. It gives me far more than I have given them.
Well, Colonel Todd Lyons, thank you very much for being a Marine for our nation and for being on the show today at the YourTown television program.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
And thank you for joining us for this segment of the MPS Foundation-sponsored Your Time television program. Please join us again when we find out the interesting things that our faculty and students are doing on the Monterey Peninsula.